It started with a neon orange sticker slapped across my tractor's windshield like a slap in the face. Abandoned vehicle, subject to tow. The date? Today. The report? Anonymous. But I knew damn well who it was. Before I go further, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to deal with a neighbor who thinks the world spins around their front lawn. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. Now back to the sticker. My name's Mike Harper. I own 5 acres just outside a development run by one of those overreaching HOAs. You know the type. The rules read like scripture, but the people enforcing them act like gods. And chief among them was Ms. Lorna Trask, a woman with 3 poodles, 0 tolerance for noncompliance, and a God-given talent for minding business that isn't hers. She's not a Karen by name, but if you looked up the type, arms crossed, lips pursed, HOA binder clutched like a weapon, she'd be the centerfold. Now, to be clear, I don't even live in the HOA. My land borders it, but the road in front of my property? That was annexed by the development 5 years ago in some deal I never got a vote on. So when I parked my John Deere by the fence last week after grading the ditch, I figured it'd sit there for a few days before I hauled it back into the shed. It wasn't blocking anyone. It wasn't leaking oil. Hell, it was half off the shoulder. But that didn't matter to Lorna. The moment something doesn't fit her perfect little aesthetic, it becomes an eyesore. And to her, my tractor might as well have been a burning trash pile. I peeled the sticker off, careful not to smear the ink. Down at the bottom, barely legible under all the official language, was a box checked, complaint received by HOA Security Committee, which, by the way, is just Lorna and her husband, Todd, who hasn't made eye contact with me since the time I caught him digging up our shared property stake and trying to move it 6 feet east. I looked over at her house across the street. Immaculate hedges, pristine lawn, mailbox shaped like a bald eagle doing a salute. And there she was, on her porch, bathrobe tight, coffee mug in hand, watching me like she was waiting for me to explode. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I waved. She didn't wave back. That's when I knew this wasn't a warning. It was a challenge. She wanted a reaction, wanted me to curse, yell, maybe storm over, and make a scene. That would have fit her narrative perfectly. The aggressive landowner who refuses to follow community standards. I'd seen her pull it with others. The single mom 2 houses down who let her kid's bike sit on the lawn? Fined. The veteran who painted his mailbox with camouflage? Forced to repaint. Lorna lived for this stuff. It gave her purpose. But see, I grew up with people like her. My mother used to call them small queens of even smaller kingdoms. They rule not with wisdom, but with pettiness. You don't beat them by fighting, you beat them by watching, by waiting. And then, you show them exactly how little control they really have. So I took a picture of the sticker. Then I checked my trail cam footage. Sure enough, last night at 9:42 p.m., Lorna walked across the road with a clipboard and flashlight, inspecting the tractor like it was a crime scene. 10 minutes later, Todd waddled over and slapped on the sticker. Not a tow truck in sight. This was all theater. I had half a mind to call the county and file a harassment complaint right then and there. But that's not how I work. Instead, I pulled out a notebook from the glove box and started writing down everything. Date, time, details, photos, documentation. That's how you beat Karens. Not with volume, but with receipts. And then I smiled, because I already knew exactly how I was going to respond. Not today, maybe not even tomorrow, but soon. And when I did, her lawn, the pride and joy of her little empire, would never be the same. Lorna Trask didn't start with me. I was just her latest project. A year before the tractor incident, she'd gone after the Kleins, a quiet couple in their 60s who had the audacity to hang a wind chime on their porch. Auditory pollution, she called it, threatened them with escalating fines until they took it down. Then it was Mr. Delgado, who dared to grow tomatoes in pots visible from the road. Unapproved landscaping. He got a notice too. After that, she pushed to ban holiday inflatables, said they lowered the visual standard of the neighborhood. Nobody liked her, but nobody fought her either, because that's the thing with Lorna. She didn't shout. She documented. She showed up to HOA meetings with spreadsheets, photographs, rule books highlighted in 3 colors. She smiled while she bled you dry. And people let her because they were tired, busy, afraid. And honestly, some of them just wanted to keep their heads down and their lawns tidy. I kept my distance for the most part. My land was zoned separately, so technically I wasn't subject to the HOA's rules. But technically doesn't matter when the HOA claims jurisdiction over your frontage road and starts weaponizing community standards. It started small. First, Lorna left a laminated flyer in my mailbox about responsible roadside appearance. Then she began noticing things. My trash cans were visible from the street. My fencing was non-compliant with neighborhood aesthetic. She even flagged my mailbox for being unpainted. I told her politely but firmly that none of it applied to me. She didn't like that. So she changed tactics. A few weeks later, I came home to find a county official measuring the ditch line near my property. When I asked what he was doing, he muttered something about a drainage complaint. I knew where that came from. I just finished reinforcing the culvert to stop runoff from flooding her side of the road, and now I was being investigated for altering the flow. I passed the inspection, of course, but the message was clear. She was escalating. I kept my cool. Always did. But I watched. And the more I watched, the more I noticed just how deep her claws were in the HOA. The president, a golf buddy of her husband, the treasurer, her sister-in-law, the enforcement committee, hand-picked friends who owed her favors or shared her taste for control. It wasn't a neighborhood. It was a fiefdom. And Lorna was queen. So when I went to the HOA office after the sticker incident, just to talk, they barely looked up from their desks. I brought photos, trail cam footage, proof that the complaint was baseless. The manager, a man named Bruce with a perpetual scowl and a tie 2 sizes too tight, glanced at the paperwork and gave a half shrug. You're technically not in our jurisdiction, Mr. Harper. But if the vehicle is on HOA-controlled roadway, we have authority to report. So you're saying someone with a grudge can label anything they don't like as abandoned, and that's enough? He didn't answer, just slid the papers back toward me. That's when I understood. This wasn't about rules. It was about power, and I had just become the next test of how far Lorna could push. As I left the office, I passed her in the parking lot. She was leaning against her SUV, one of those overly waxed, overly white monstrosities with vanity plates that read LUVRULES. She didn't speak, just sipped her iced coffee and watched me walk by. I nodded, calm, polite. But inside, I was already building the blueprint. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to send letters. I wasn't going to fight her on her turf. No, if Lorna wanted to play games, I'd give her the last round she'd ever asked for. And I'd play it with 4 wheels, a diesel engine, and treads wide enough to leave a message she couldn't ignore. Over the next week, the tone shifted. 3 more notices arrived, all left in plastic sleeves pinned to a stake by my driveway. Final warning, one read. Failure to comply may result in further action. Another claimed I was degrading the shared visual environment. The last was almost poetic in its smugness. Repeated violations suggest a disregard for community harmony. That one made me laugh. I wasn't the one disrupting harmony. I was the guy fixing potholes on the county road no one else touched. I was the one hauling stray branches after every storm while Lorna sat on her porch filing complaints with one hand and sipping lemon water with the other. But I wasn't laughing for long. 2 mornings later, I caught her taking photos again. Not just of the tractor this time, of my front yard, the workshop, even the goats in the pen near the tree line. She was bold about it, too. Didn't even try to hide when I stepped outside. You lost, I asked. She didn't answer, just clicked another picture. That evening, Todd showed up. First time in months he dared set foot on my property. We'd appreciate it, he said, shifting nervously, if you move the machinery off the roadside. Some folks are concerned. Some folks, I repeated. Or just your wife? He didn't answer that either. I let him stand there in the dusk, shuffling his feet while the wind picked up dust behind him. Then I looked him in the eye and said, tell Lorna I'll move it when I'm done grading the ditch. Not before. He didn't argue. But the next day, the sign went up. Handmade. Hammered right into the grass near the road. Private community. No farm equipment beyond this point. Funny thing is, it wasn't even her land. That patch of grass technically belonged to the county, but she knew it didn't matter. Appearances were enough. So I took it down, didn't yell, didn't gloat, just pulled the sign out of the dirt, broke it in half and dropped it by her mailbox. That night, the email started. Someone, wonder who, had sent an anonymous complaint to the Agricultural Board, accused me of operating unauthorized commercial activity on residential adjacent land, said my tractor work constituted unlicensed services. I spent 2 hours filling out rebuttal forms and attaching every zoning exemption I had on record. And as I clicked submit, something in me hardened. It wasn't about the tractor anymore. It was about dignity, about not letting someone with a plastic clipboard and a shaky sense of power bully their neighbors into submission. That's when I started planning. Not petty revenge, not vandalism. I wanted something poetic, something final. So I measured the road, literally. I pulled out my wheel and ran it edge to edge. Took note of the curb cut. Mapped the line between her property and the legal right-of-way. Then I looked at her lawn, her precious, obsessively watered, professionally trimmed front lawn. That's when the idea settled into place. Solid, clean, simple. If she thought my tractor was such an eyesore, I'd give her a real reason to look. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't vent online. I didn't even whisper it to my buddy Rick over beers. I just oiled the engine, sharpened the treads, and waited. And every time I passed her house that week, every time she glared from behind her curtains or scribbled notes on her pad, I smiled like a man with nothing but time. Because the day was coming. And when it did, Lorna Trask's kingdom of tidy little rules and manicured control was going to feel the full weight of 17,000 pounds of diesel-fueled defiance. The sun wasn't even up when I fired the engine. Tractors don't whisper. They growl. Deep, low, deliberate. The kind of sound that carries, especially at 5:42 a.m. on a Saturday. I didn't rush, just let it warm, the cabin filling with the familiar smell of diesel and dust. I'd already checked the oil, pressure, brakes, everything tight. Lorna liked to pretend she ran things around here. Today I would remind her who really worked this land. I eased down the driveway slow and steady, tires kissing the gravel like a drumbeat. No trailer, no blade, just the tractor, as naked as truth. I pulled onto the road with purpose, wheels aligned exactly on the right-of-way, not an inch over the line. Not yet. She was waiting. I saw her silhouette behind the blinds, twitching like a live wire. I wondered if she knew, if she'd heard the engine or felt it in her bones. The same way deer sense a storm before the first drop hits. 3 houses down, a porch light flicked on, then another. Curtains parted, phones raised. Good, let them see it. Let them remember. I stopped at the edge of her lawn. It was perfect, of course. Not a blade out of place. Fertilized within an inch of its life. Mowed diagonally twice a week. The kind of grass that's only that green if you pay someone named Tyler in khakis to make it so. I shifted into neutral, set the brake, climbed down, and placed a single laminated sheet on the sidewalk. Printed in bold 12-point type. This is a legal demonstration of property rights and boundary enforcement. Video recording in progress. Then I climbed back up, released the brake, and rolled forward. Tires hit grass with a soft crunch. And then I drove. Not fast, not wild. Slow, measured, destructive. The first pass took out her petunias, those purple things she'd planted in an arc last spring. Gone in a single rotation. The tires chewed through mulch like paper. The mower deck wasn't down, but the weight alone left 2 deep, dark trenches in its wake. I didn't stop. I didn't swerve. Right through the center of her lawn I went, pivoting cleanly in front of her white porch swing before looping back toward the curb. The smell of torn grass and churned dirt filled the air. Halfway through the second pass, her front door slammed open. What are you doing? She came down the steps like a thundercloud in a bathrobe, one slipper hanging off her heel. Get off my property! I'm calling the police! I didn't answer. Didn't need to. Everything was recorded. Dash cam running, two neighbors filming on their phones. The whole damn street would be viral by lunchtime. I completed one last slow turn, then guided the tractor back toward the road. Made sure my treads passed over her custom lawn sign. Welcome, but only if you follow the rules. Crushed it flat. At the curb, I paused. She was standing inches from the tracks, shaking, screaming something about lawsuits and jail time. You just trespassed, she shrieked. No, ma'am, I said calmly. I followed the edge of the county easement. Same one you claimed when you had my tractor stickered last week. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. But she didn't have the words. Only rage, and the busted remains of her precious kingdom behind her. The cops showed up 23 minutes later. 2 units, lights flashing, no sirens. One officer stepped out cautious but calm, hand resting near his belt. Not on his weapon, but just enough to let you know he meant business. The other circled around and started talking to neighbors, probably looking for a witness. He didn't have to look far. Lorna met them halfway down her driveway, voice already shaking from volume, not fear. I couldn't hear every word, but the hand gestures said enough, pointing to the lawn, to me, to the sky like she was summoning divine justice. I stayed by the tractor, engine off, arms crossed, not moving. Officer Dunley, I'd met him before, decent guy, approached first. Mr. Harper. Morning. Mind telling me what happened here? I stayed within the county easement, didn't cross the property line. Everything's documented, videos running. I've got the survey maps too, if you'd like to see them. He blinked and then glanced back at Lorna, who was still pacing in furious circles. Anything you want to add? Only that I've been harassed for over a year. The HOAs issued false violations, tampered with signage, and filed a bogus complaint about an abandoned vehicle parked on land they don't own. This was a demonstration, legal, peaceful, disruptive, sure, but not criminal. He exhaled through his nose, slow. Do you have proof? I handed him the envelope I'd prepared the night before. Inside, maps, dates, timestamps, printouts of every notice, copies of every complaint, stills from my trail cam showing Lorna trespassing. It was all there, organized, calm, unshakable. He took it, flipped through the first few pages. All right, we'll take statements. They did. 45 minutes later, they left, without arresting anyone. Lorna stood by her porch, arms stiff, face pale with fury. The officers had explained everything. Civil matter, no property line violation, no grounds for a charge. And most importantly, retaliation cuts both ways. Because by reporting my tractor, she'd created a paper trail, one I followed right back into her front yard. Over the next few days, the neighborhood buzzed. Word got around fast. Video clips from neighbors spread like wildfire. A Reddit post under r/fuck HOA hit the front page by Sunday night. People started talking, really talking. Turns out I wasn't the only one fed up. HOA meetings got tense. Residents demanded transparency. Lorna tried to defend herself, said I was unstable, aggressive, a danger to the community. But when someone asked why she was inspecting other people's properties with a flashlight, she had no answer. 3 weeks later, she resigned from the enforcement committee. Todd stopped waving from his lawn altogether. And the lawn itself? It never recovered. Even with new sod, the tracks were still visible, like scars beneath a cheap bandage. Every time I drove by, I saw them, and I smiled. I didn't hate her, I pitied her, because people like Lorna think control equals respect. But what they never understand is that respect can't be demanded, only earned. Me? I just wanted to grade a ditch in peace. And now I can, because sometimes the only way to silence a Karen is to leave tire marks right across her throne.